Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to be discussing some pretty fascinating views of the world from the perspective of the YouTuber Ben Thomas, who you might know better as Sisyphus55. And I want to start by pointing out a lived contradiction, something almost all of us in the modern world share. We have this seemingly endless freedom, right? Way more choices than any generation before us. Yet somehow, we find ourselves constantly exhausted, just endlessly scrolling on our phones to make our brains go quiet. We are literally swimming in information, but paralyzed by this underlying, almost existential dread.
So this brings us to a massive question that Thomas frequently explores. Why does ultimate freedom feel so exhausting? You absolutely know the feeling. You're lying in bed, you're tired but wired, and you just instinctively reach for that glowing rectangle. It's like a late-night pacifier for your mind, whether that's a 15-second dance trend, some outrageous news headline, or a beautifully curated lifestyle photo. It's this anxiety born not from a lack of freedom, but from an unprecedented access to it. We're essentially trying to outrun a deep sense of meaninglessness, but the tools we use to escape, they're actually just tightening the trap. So, let's get into it with Section 1, the Panopticon. Welcome to the trap.
To really get this, we have to look at philosopher Byung-Chul Han's concept of psychopolitics, which perfectly diagnoses our modern malaise. See, historically, if a system wanted to control you, it just forced your compliance. You were a subject reporting to an external master. But modern neoliberal society, it's pulled off a brilliant trick. It preaches liberty. It tells us, hey, we aren't subjects. We are projects that need to be constantly perfected, optimized, and shared with the world. We aren't forced to work anymore. Instead, we're internally driven to exploit ourselves, whether that means perfectly curating our online persona or just grinding for some new productivity metric.
Think about the 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham. He designed the physical panopticon. Basically, it was a prison where a single guard could watch any inmate at any time, which forced the inmates to behave simply because they might be watched. Well, today, we live in Han's digital panopticon. But here's the kicker. There are no guards, and there is zero physical force. Instead, it's all voluntary self-exposure. We just happily surrender our data, our locations, our thoughts, our desires, totally of our own free will. We are simultaneously the inmates and the guards, relentlessly monitoring our own little projects.
Moving right along to Section 2, Digital Church, Algorithmic Religion.
This structure of constant self-monitoring isn't just a prison, you guys. It actually functions remarkably like a religion. In this ecosystem, capital and productivity are our new gods. And as the source material points out, the smartphone, it is the digital devotional object. We literally carry these mobile confessionals everywhere we go. In this framework, we're burdened by this modern sense of original sin, the guilt of not being productive enough, not being informed enough, not being optimal enough. So we seek salvation from the algorithm. When we click like, it's the modern equivalent of saying amen. We're signaling our devotion to the social order and just begging for a momentary reprieve from our existential guilt.
The really crucial point here is that engaging with this digital church births an entirely new version of you, the algorithmic self. This version of you operates on a 7-second attention span. It's this incredibly passive identity shaped entirely by whatever the machine reflects back at it. As you scroll, the algorithm feeds you these tiny microdoses of validation, of outrage, of desire. It slowly steers you, not by forcing you, but by predicting and nudging your baseline impulses until your actual sense of self just kind of merges with the endless scrolling feed.
All right, Section 3, Algorithmic Outrage, Addiction to Anger.
Now, it's not just our consumer desires being shaped here. It's our deeply held beliefs and our political identities too. Let's bring in philosopher Mark Kingwell, who diagnosed this modern psychological epidemic he calls conviction addiction. Holding really strong, uncompromising political views online, it isn't about engaging in civil discourse anymore. It has literally become a drug. The algorithm monetizes our deepest anxieties by just feeding us a constant, endless stream of polarizing content. It's an addiction to the social approval and the dopamine hits we get from loudly and snappily declaring exactly how right we are and how utterly unforgivably wrong the other side is. And honestly, the symptoms of this addiction are everywhere. We see the total monetization of outrage. We see the absolute demonization of specific groups, where people just retreat into these toxic little echo chambers. Nuanced discourse? Completely lost. We've totally abandoned the search for objective truth or pragmatic coexistence. Instead, we are constantly seeking what Kingwell calls the invisible hand of "I'm right, you're wrong." It ruins family dinners, it destroys pragmatic social progress, and it does it all just to keep us absolutely addicted to the feed.
Which brings us to Section 4,
The power process, systemic disruption.
So why is this so incredibly effective on us? To understand that, we really have to look at a fundamental psychotechnological disconnect in human nature. Psychologically, there's this thing called the power process. It dictates that humans need 4 things to feel fulfilled. We need to set a goal, put in genuine effort, attain that goal, and feel a sense of autonomy in doing so. But our highly industrialized, digital society completely disrupts this biological checklist. I mean, it makes basic survival way too easy. You can literally order a gourmet meal with a thumb tap, but it makes solving massive, systemic problems like pollution or privacy feel utterly impossible.
Because true systemic autonomy feels completely blocked, the system traps us in performative, surrogate activities. These are basically empty goals we chase just to fulfill that biological need for the power process. Building a massive following on social media, chasing metrics in a video game, or winning these performative arguments on Twitter, these are surrogate activities. We pour so much effort into them because they give us a false sense of control and attainment, all while our actual real-world autonomy is slowly being eroded by the Digital Panopticon.
So let's look at Section 5, Existential Revolt, Escaping the Trap.
Okay, I know that is a lot of heavy diagnosis. But how do we actually escape this trap? Well, we need a revolt. To escape, we first have to recognize the battleground. It's a fight between the algorithmic self and the authentic self. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard actually warned us about this. He said that losing oneself in the crowd, or, today's algorithm, strips us of our authentic individuality. The algorithmic self is passive. It desperately seeks external validation and is trapped in predictive loops created by tech companies. But your authentic self? That is reflective, autonomous, and capable of being fully grounded in the present moment. You have to remember, you are a human being, not just a data profile built to serve some digital machine.
And this brings us right to the existentialist philosophers. Jean-Paul Sartre famously declared, "Existence precedes essence." So what does that actually mean for us right now? Well, it means you are born first, without a predefined script, without a rigid purpose, and certainly without an algorithmic destiny. You have the ultimate freedom and the profound responsibility to knit your own meaning out of the universe. When you just let the algorithm tell you what to care about, you are acting in what Sartre called bad faith, basically denying your own ultimate freedom to choose.
So, instead of retreating into the digital church for salvation, the sources point us toward Albert Camus' concept of the absurd hero and the philosophy of amor fati, which means loving one's fate. It means embracing reality exactly as it is, the eternal now, as Wittgenstein put it. It's stopping this frantic, anxious search for a digital distraction to numb your brain. Instead, try just sitting with reality, with all of its imperfections, its boredom, and its beauty, without needing to post a hot take about it.
So what are the actual actionable strategies for this existential revolt? First, you must de-automatize the mind. Catch yourself the exact moment you reflexively reach for your phone just to avoid being bored. Practice mindfulness. Second, cultivate reflective autonomy. Set intrinsic goals that actually matter to you, not just surrogate activities meant to impress some invisible audience. Third, limit your indulgence in the cup of conviction. Honestly, you don't need a fiery opinion on every single trending topic. And finally, actively choose to anchor yourself in the present moment, rather than disappearing into a predictive, algorithmically generated feed.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. This whole system, it relies entirely on your passivity. It literally relies on the autoplay feature to seamlessly transition you into the very next distraction. So, what are you going to choose to do with your attention the exact moment this explainer ends? Are you going to let the Digital Panopticon dictate your next move, or will you step into your own autonomy? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning and keep reflecting.
So, are you constantly scrolling? Like, you know that feeling.
Oh yeah, we all know it.
Right. You're chasing likes, or you're seeking that little ping of digital validation.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just, I don't know, trying to distract yourself for 5 minutes.
That's a quick break. Right?
Exactly, just a quick break. Yet somehow you walk away from your screen feeling deeply anxious, like completely exhausted, and somehow even more isolated than when you first picked up the phone.
Yeah, it's a very specific kind of modern hangover.
It really is. And if you are, nodding your head right now listening to this, or if you've ever felt that phantom buzz in your pocket and felt this sudden spike of dread, you are definitely not alone.
No, absolutely not. It's incredibly common.
Right. So today, our mission on this deep dive is to sort of untangle this incredibly complex web. We want to look at how modern technology, social media, and just the the constant, relentless news cycle are fundamentally rewiring your desires.
Your desires, your politics, everything.
Yeah, your politics, and honestly, your very sense of self.
It really is this profound psychological and cultural shift that we're living through right now. And I think what's most insidious about it is that it's happening largely below the level of our conscious awareness.
We don't even realize we're doing it.
Exactly. We treat our exhaustion as this, like, personal failing. You know, we think, oh, I just lack discipline.
Yeah, I'm just lazy today.
Right. Rather than seeing it as the completely predictable result of a very, very specific technological architecture.
Right, the architecture of the platforms themselves. And to help us decode that architecture today, we're drawing on a really fascinating synthesis of ideas. We're leaning heavily on the analytical work of the YouTuber Ben Thomas, who operates under the name Sisyphus55.
Yeah, his work on this is just phenomenal.
It is. What's absolutely brilliant about his approach to this whole topic is how he weaves together modern psychology, cultural critique, and classic existential philosophy.
Which is such a unique blend.
Right. He doesn't just look at the screen. He looks at the mind staring into the screen.
And that's a very potent combination.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if we only look at this through the lens of standard tech criticism.
Like just complaining about screen time.
Exactly. Complaining about screen time or like data privacy. If we just do that, we miss the deeper structural forces at play.
We miss the why.
Exactly. So by bringing in thinkers like, Byung-Chul Han, Albert Camus, Søren Kierkegaard, we can actually examine the psychological bedrock of why we're so vulnerable to this technology in the first place.
So we want to answer exactly why this digital exhaustion happens to you, and more importantly, how you can stage a kind of philosophical rebellion against it. We're going to explore this idea of the algorithmic self, which, frankly, when I started digging into the source material, completely blew my mind.
It's a game changer of a concept, for sure.
It really is. But to understand why we feel so trapped by our screens, I realized we kind of have to start by looking at the invisible architecture of the digital world itself.
Yeah, we have to look at the nature of prisons.
Right. We have to look at how the very concept of what constitutes a prison has evolved. Because we've moved from, physical spaces with iron bars to psychological states.
Internal prisons.
Exactly. And to really grasp the mechanics of this, we need to go back a bit. We need to go back to the 18th century and look at a philosopher named Jeremy Bentham, specifically his architectural concept called the Panopticon.
Right. I mean, the Panopticon is arguably the most crucial metaphor for understanding our modern digital lives today.
Okay, so break that down for us. What is it?
So Bentham wasn't just theorizing in an abstract way. He actually designed this theoretical, perfect physical prison. So imagine a circular building.
Okay, circular building.
And at the very center of this circle is a single tall guard tower. Now, the prison cells line the entire outer ring of the building, and every single cell is backlit by a window on the outside wall.
So the light shines through the cell, meaning the guard can see everything.
Precisely. The guard in the central tower can look out and see the silhouette of any inmate in any cell at any time.
Wow. Okay, but the inmates, they can't see the guard, right? Like, that's the terrifying genius of the design.
That is the core of it, yeah. The guard tower has these mirrored windows, or like a system of blinds. So the inmates have absolutely no way of knowing if the guard is looking directly at them at any given moment.
Meaning they might be watched at any second.
Right. And because they might be watched at any second, they have to behave as if they are always being watched.
Always. Man, that's intense.
It changes everything. Because of that specific architectural setup, the inmates internalize the surveillance.
They start policing themselves.
Exactly. They start to police their own behavior. The physical force of a guard, holding a baton in the hallway, that's entirely replaced by the psychological pressure of potential visibility.
So the inmates behave just because the architecture forces them into this state of constant paranoid self-surveillance?
Yep. The prison essentially runs itself. It's perfectly efficient.
Okay, so that is Bentham's physical prison. But transitioning to our current reality, the sources argue that we are living in what is called the Digital Panopticon.
And it's a massive upgrade.
Right. What really struck me is the argument that the Digital Panopticon is infinitely more efficient than Bentham's physical model. And why? Because it doesn't require physical walls at all. It relies entirely on voluntary self-exposure.
And that right there is the defining evolutionary leap of surveillance.
It's voluntary.
Completely. I mean, in Bentham's prison, the inmates are forced into those backlit cells completely against their will, right? It's a coercive physical system.
They don't want to be there.
Exactly. But in the Digital Panopticon, you actively, eagerly collaborate with your own surveillance. You literally willingly surrender your data.
We hand it over.
We do. You don't just endure visibility, you actively crave it. You post your real-time location, your innermost thoughts, your relationship status, your vacation photos, and it's all out of this profound engineered inner need to share and be perceived by the tower.
It's wild to think about. I mean, we literally carry the guard tower in our pockets. And we spend hours every single day voluntarily typing up our own dossiers and just handing them over to the warden.
We are the inmates and the informants, all rolled into one.
That is so creepy, but so true. And this brings us to the philosopher Byung-Chul Han, right? And his brilliant concept of psychopolitics. Han argues that because of this dynamic, we have undergone this massive societal shift in how power and control operate. We've gone from being subjects to being projects.
Yeah, let's break down the etymology there, because I think it's vital to really grasp this. The word subject literally means to be thrown under.
Thrown under. Okay.
Yeah, like to be subjugated by an external force.
Yeah.
A king, a feudal lord, a dictator, or even just, a traditional factory boss.
Somebody outside of you.
Right. In those older systems of power, the domination clearly comes from the outside. You know exactly who is oppressing you. But Han argues that in our current era, which is heavily shaped by neoliberal capitalism and digital technology, that system has completely evolved.
Evolved how, exactly?
Well, we are no longer subjects who are forced to obey an external master. Instead, we are projects. And we are constantly encouraged to optimize ourselves endlessly.
Oh, right. Like, we are constantly bombarded with messaging that tells us we are entirely free. We're told to, be our best selves or to hustle, build our personal brands, track our sleep, monetize our hobbies.
Monetize everything, yeah.
Exactly. But Han calls this the neoliberal illusion of freedom. We take that liberty and we twist it into auto-exploitation. We somehow become both the master and the slave in our own lives.
That's a perfect trap.
We willingly grind ourselves into dust, and we mistake the needs of the digital economy and, endless productivity and nonstop engagement for our own personal desires.
And it is an incredibly insidious form of control, precisely because it masks itself as freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the psychological difference here. When a system forces you to work in a coal mine for 14 hours a day, you know you're oppressed, right?
Yeah, obviously. You hate the mine owner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can point to the mine owner and say, there is the source of my misery. That is my enemy. You can unionize. You can revolt against that guy.
But when you are, say, a freelance creator or an entrepreneur, or honestly just an average person trying to curate a flawless aesthetic life on Instagram.
Right. You are the one forcing yourself to work those 14 hours. You are the one demanding absolute perfection, endless output, constant availability.
So I was trying to visualize this when I was reading the notes, and tell me if this analogy tracks, okay?
Let's hear it.
It's like being in a gym. You are both the ruthless personal trainer blowing the whistle, screaming at you to run faster on the treadmill, Andy. You are the exhausted, sweating gym goer whose lungs are burning.
That's good, yeah.
But because you bought the gym membership yourself, and because society tells you that being fit is like the ultimate good, you've convinced yourself you are entirely 100% free, while you are literally torturing yourself.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy. You have fully internalized both roles, the exploiter and the exploited. And this dynamic, it fundamentally neutralizes the traditional idea of resistance or revolution.
That's exactly what I was wondering. Like, if the oppressor isn't a king, and it isn't a billionaire factory owner, if the oppressor is me, what does a revolution even look like?
It's a paradox.
Right. Because to overthrow the system, I'd basically have to overthrow myself.
And Han points out that because the struggle has moved entirely from the external world into the internal world, the resulting emotional fallout changes too.
How so?
Well, the emotion is no longer a revolutionary anger directed outward at a common enemy. Instead, the resulting emotion is depression, burnout, and anxiety directed inward.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When you fail to optimize your project, when your post doesn't get enough likes, when you aren't productive enough on a random Tuesday, or when you just feel sad instead of endlessly positive, you don't blame the system for setting impossible standards.
You blame yourself.
You blame yourself for not being good enough.
Man, that hits really hard.
Yeah.
So the exhaustion we all feel, when we log off, it isn't just because we're doing a lot of tasks on our phones. It's because we are constantly, inevitably, failing to live up to the impossible algorithmic standards of the internal master we've created.
Exactly.
We are literally auto-exploiting our way into profound clinical anxiety.
We are. And this is where the architecture of the technology perfectly intersects with our psychological vulnerability. Because we view ourselves as these endless projects requiring constant optimization, we desperately crave a metric.
We need a score.
Yes, we need something objective to tell us if we are succeeding or failing. We need a scale to weigh our worth. And this desperation for measurement, it leads us straight to the altar of the algorithm.
Which is such a fascinating transition in the source material, looking at the algorithm as this new digital church. So we are anxious, we are self-exploiting, we are desperate for a metric to prove our value, and then we are handed this piece of glowing glass.
The perfect solution.
Right. The smartphone essentially functions as a modern digital devotional object. It's like a mobile confessional booth. But instead of whispering our sins to a priest, we log our deepest desires, our fears, our locations, our political outrages, and our late-night impulse purchases right into the search bar.
And the religious parallels here are not just metaphorical. They map perfectly onto human behavior. I mean, think about the ritualistic nature of how we interact with these devices.
Like checking it first thing in the morning.
Exactly. We wake up and the very first thing we do is reach for the phone. We seek its guidance. Capital and data have, in many ways, replaced traditional religious or communal structures as the new ultimate authority.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, and the simple act of clicking like on a post, it's a social signification of your devotion. It's the modern equivalent of saying amen.
Wow. Clicking like is saying amen.
Yeah, you are bowing your head to the metric, signaling to the network that you agree with the established order of what is considered valuable.
There is this phrase that I came across while diving into this, predictive salvation. That just stuck with me.
It's a great term.
It really is. Algorithm offers this warped, technological form of salvation. It promises that if you just consume the exact right content, if you buy the right aesthetic lifestyle products, if you publicly align with the right trending moral opinions, you will finally find peace. You'll be whole.
The algorithm will solve your life.
Exactly. It promises to solve your life.
It is a digital theology. The algorithm acts as this omniscient, omnipresent entity. It genuinely knows what you look at when you are entirely alone and think no one is watching.
It knows the real you, or at least part of it.
Right. It tracks your hesitations, your doom scrolling, your late night searches, and it uses that omniscience to serve you exactly what it calculates will keep your eyes on the screen.
But we have to understand what it's really doing, right? Because it isn't serving you as a whole, complete person. It is constructing a very specific, fragmented version of you.
Yes, the algorithmic self. And this is where it gets a little theoretical, but so incredibly illuminating. There's a concept drawn from the philosophers Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari called the body without organs.
Now, I have to say, when I first read that phrase in the notes, I pictured some kind of weird sci-fi horror movie.
It sounds like body horror, for sure.
Yeah, but it's actually this brilliant way to understand how social media platforms view us.
It's a complex piece of terminology, but let's break it down simply. When Deleuze and Guattari talk about an organism, they mean a structured entity where every single part has a specific function and a hierarchy.
Okay, so like in a literal body, the heart pumps blood, the stomach digests food.
Exactly. And in a psychological sense, your organism is your structured identity, your morals, your long-term goals, your self-discipline, your values.
That person I'm trying to be.
Right. But a body without organs, however, is a state of unorganized, raw potential. It's just flows of pure desire, completely stripped of any organizing structure or hierarchy.
So if my structured self is the person who wants to be a good friend, save money for a house, and read more books, my body without organs is just my raw, uncoordinated impulses, like hunger, arousal, anger, distraction.
Precisely. And here's the terrifying part about social media. The algorithm does not interact with your structured identity.
It doesn't care about my goals.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The algorithm does not care about your moral philosophy or your 10-year career plan. It interacts exclusively with your body without organs. It maps those raw flows of desire.
Right.
It knows exactly how long your eyes lingered on an outrage-inducing political headline, or, a video of someone cutting kinetic sand, or an advertisement for a lifestyle you envy. It bypasses your conscious, organized self entirely and just farms your raw impulses.
It literally strips away our organs, our humanity, our context, and just sees us as a collection of twitchy nerve endings waiting to be stimulated.
That's exactly how it sees you.
But this brings up a massive question for me. If the algorithm is just farming our raw impulses, why do we willingly subject ourselves to it for hours a day? Like, why do we like it? And the sources suggest that the answer seems to be that we use this algorithmic self as a defense mechanism against our own minds. We use mindless scrolling as a pacifier.
A pacifier is exactly the right word for it. We use apps like TikTok or Reddit, Instagram, X, whatever, to silence a very specific kind of internal dread. And 19th century philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote extensively about this feeling. He called it the dizziness of freedom.
The dizziness of freedom. I love that phrasing, but what exactly did he mean by it?
Well, Kierkegaard used the analogy of standing at the edge of a massive cliff. When you look down, you feel a profound sense of dread.
Yeah, obviously. It's terrifying.
But Kierkegaard pointed out that the dread isn't just the fear of accidentally falling. It is the terrifying realization that you have the absolute freedom to throw yourself off.
Oh.
The dread comes from your own limitless potential, your own agency. So translating that to our daily lives, when you sit alone in a quiet room with no phone and absolutely no distractions, you are confronted with your own freedom.
You're just alone with your thoughts.
Right. You are confronted with your responsibility to give your life meaning, your past choices, the terrifying reality of your own mortality. And that realization is dizzying. It is existentially overwhelming.
So rather than face that dizzying freedom, rather than do the really hard work of figuring out who we are and what we want to do with our finite time on Earth, we just hit the escape hatch.
We check our phones.
We check our phones. The infinite scroll. It numbs the existential dread by filling the silence with continuous, frictionless content. We literally outsource our consciousness to the machine so we don't have to be alone with ourselves.
Precisely. We allow the algorithmic self to take the wheel because it asks absolutely nothing of us except our passive attention.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because if the algorithm is tracking our actual behavior, if it is accurately mapping our longest lingers or deepest clicks, the things we look at when we're alone in the dark and the social mass is totally off, isn't this algorithmic self actually a more truthful reflection of who we really are?
That's an interesting point.
Right. I mean, isn't it more honest than the carefully curated, polite persona we show our coworkers or our friends at a dinner party? Like, the algorithm sees the unvarnished truth of human nature.
That is a very compelling argument, and it forces us to deeply consider what we actually define as the truth of a human being. It is absolutely true that the algorithm accurately maps our impulsive, raw, monkey brain desires.
It knows what we want.
It knows precisely what stimulates our dopamine receptors and our amygdala. However, the existentialist view, and really the core of the psychological critique we are exploring here, strongly differentiates between those raw impulses and our reflective, mature identity.
So you're saying the monkey brain isn't the totality of who we are?
Far from it. A human being is not merely a bundle of reactive urges. We are also our long-term commitments. We are our values, our capacity for self-restraint, our ability to delay gratification, and our capacity for deep, deliberate thought.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think about it this way. If I am on a strict diet, my monkey brain desperately wants a donut.
Always.
Always. The algorithm will show me 1,000 videos of donuts because it knows I will look at them. But the truth of my identity also includes my conscious decision not to eat the donut for the sake of my health.
Ah, I see. So the algorithm only flatters the impulse. It completely ignores the restraint.
Exactly. The danger of the algorithmic self is that it feeds only the most basic, impulsive parts of our nature while starving the reflective parts. And continually indulging the raw impulse often destroys the mature identity.
Because you're just feeding the beast.
Right. If you only ever feed the monkey brain, you starve the philosopher, the citizen, the partner, the creator. The algorithm reflects a truth, yes, but it is a flattened, diminished, almost entirely biological truth that completely ignores our higher human capacities.
That makes total sense. We are sacrificing our higher selves to satisfy our basest instincts simply because the basest instincts are just so much easier to monetize.
They are highly profitable.
And that leads directly into how this internal psychological damage spills out into the real world. Because while the algorithm is busy pacifying our internal dread with, endless dance videos and shopping hauls, it is simultaneously doing something much more destructive to our social fabric.
Oh, definitely.
It is actively monetizing our social interactions by replacing nuanced human connection with performative outrage. And this is where we have to talk about conviction addiction.
Yes. This is where the internal mechanisms we've just discussed really collide with the public political sphere. The analysis here draws heavily on the work of philosopher Mark Kingwell and his incredibly apt concept of conviction addiction.
I had honestly never heard political and social opinions described as a literal chemical addiction before, but the moment I heard it in the notes, it made horrifying sense.
It really reframes everything.
It does. Kingwell argues that the very interface of social media constructs an environment of rapid, variable rewards. Every time you post a strong opinion or take a rigid moral stance on the controversy of the day, you get likes, retweets, and comments.
The dopamine hits.
Right. But these aren't just digital high fives. Psychologically, they simulate social belonging, they simulate tribal approval, and that triggers massive dopamine hits in the brain.
And we know exactly how dopamine loops work. Just like any substance addiction, the user quickly develops a tolerance.
The baseline hit is no longer enough.
Exactly. The architecture of the platforms actively discourages nuance, subtlety, or, heaven forbid, admitting you might be uncertain about a complex topic. Nuance does not go viral. It's complicated, does not generate engagement.
So users are heavily incentivized to constantly ratchet up their views. To get that same hit of social approval today, you have to use stronger language. You have to express more extreme, unyielding opinions. You basically have to be more outraged today than you were yesterday.
The mechanics of this escalation are very predictable, actually.
Yeah.
There are essentially gateway drugs to this addiction.
What do those look like?
It almost always starts with just raising your voice online, being slightly more snarky or definitive than you would ever be in person. Then it quickly moves to deliberately misunderstanding your interlocutors.
Oh, this is so common, like stripping away all the context of what someone said, assuming the absolute worst possible interpretation of their words, just so you have an excuse to be righteously angry at them.
Yes, bad faith interpretations. And the next stage is relying on the classic dog whistle defenses.
Like what?
When called out, the addict retreats to, well, that's not exactly what I'm saying, but the fact that you think I'm saying that proves how corrupt you are.
Oh man, I see that every day.
It is a rhetorical strategy designed entirely to avoid genuine debate while simultaneously riling up your own ideological base for more dopamine hits.
And I think it is vital to pause here and explicitly note for you, the listener, that this is absolutely not a partisan issue.
Not at all.
Whether we are looking at left-wing cancel culture dynamics or right-wing conspiracy theories and outrage cycles, the underlying mechanism is identical. The algorithm is completely, ruthlessly agnostic regarding your politics.
It doesn't care.
It does not care if you are liberal, conservative, libertarian, or anything in between. It only cares about one single metric: engagement. Time on screen. And human psychology dictates that anger and moral outrage are the most engaging emotions we possess.
It is equal opportunity exploitation. The system doesn't want you to be right. It wants you to be mad.
Because mad people click.
Mad people click, mad people type, and mad people share. And this fundamental reality leads us to a deeply unsettling conclusion about the classical liberal concept of the marketplace of ideas.
Right. We've all been taught this idea since high school civics. The theory goes that if you just put all the ideas out there in the public square, the bad ideas will eventually be defeated by reason and logic, and the truth will eventually win out.
The cream rises to the top.
Exactly. But looking at the internet today, that clearly isn't happening. Why does rational debate completely fail online?
It fails because the digital public square is not built for reason. It is built for something psychologists call the affect heuristic.
The affect heuristic. Okay, we need to break that down deeply. What is the mechanism there?
So the affect heuristic is a psychological term heavily studied by researchers like Paul Slovic and Daniel Kahneman. It describes our cognitive reliance on immediate emotional responses, our affect, to make complex decisions rather than using deep logical analysis.
Like a shortcut.
Exactly. It's a cognitive shortcut. Kahneman talks about System 1 thinking, which is fast and emotional, versus System 2 thinking, which is slow and logical.
And the internet forces us entirely into System 1.
Almost exclusively. The news cycle and our social media feeds bombard us with an immense, entirely unmanageable amount of stimuli. You are scrolling, and within 10 seconds, you see a tragic natural disaster in one country, a highly complex political scandal in your own country, a celebrity faux pas, and an advertisement for shoes.
It's just too much context switching.
Right. Your brain cannot possibly process the geopolitical nuances of all those events in real time. But the environment demands a response from you. You have to react instantly. Do I like this or dislike this? Am I angry or am I happy?
So when our brain is faced with a really hard question like, what are the macroeconomic implications of this new trade policy? Our brain basically says, that's too hard. And it substitutes an easier question. How does the aesthetic of this post make me feel?
That is the exact mechanism of the affect heuristic. You substitute complex analysis for immediate feeling. And strong immediate feelings do not emerge from deep understanding.
They really don't.
In fact, strong immediate feelings are almost always a substitute for understanding. You feel a flash of tribal disgust, you hit retweet with an angry comment, and you move on.
There is literally no time to read a white paper or understand the historical context of a conflict before the timeline physically moves on to the next outrage.
Therefore, reason alone cannot regulate this mental market. The classical, invisible hand of truth that was supposed to guide the marketplace of ideas has been entirely replaced by the invisible hand of, I'm right, you're wrong.
Wow.
The system optimizes for ideological purity, absolute certainty, and tribal signaling. It explicitly penalizes intellectual humility and truth-seeking.
It's like trying to host a delicate, highly intellectual chess tournament in the middle of a professional wrestling ring.
That's a great image.
Right. It doesn't matter how smart the chess players are or how logical their strategies might be. If the crowd is screaming for blood and the arena is built for body slams, the nuance of the chess game is completely annihilated.
The board gets flipped immediately.
Exactly. The environment itself dictates the behavior. The interface demands a spectacle, so it turns us all into gladiators.
That is a very vivid and accurate way to put it. As the media theorist Marshall McLuhan famously said, the medium is the message. And the message of the social media medium is conflict, speed, and rigid conviction.
So we are stuck in this wrestling ring. We are auto-exploiting ourselves. We are running from our existential dread. We are addicted to outrage. The entire ecosystem is making us miserable, angry, and depressed.
It's quite a list.
It is, which begs the obvious question. If it is so universally terrible for our mental health, why do we stay so fiercely engaged? Like, why don't we just all log off, delete the apps, and go outside?
That is the million-dollar question. And to answer it, we have to look at how modern technology intersects with our deep evolutionary biology.
Okay, biology now.
Yeah, we stay engaged because our natural evolutionary drives have been completely short-circuited, leaving this massive psychological void that we are desperate to fill. And this brings us to the concept of surrogate activities and something called the power process.
Now, I know this gets into some intense territory based on the source notes. The idea of the power process is drawn from radical critiques of industrial society, particularly the work of the French philosopher Jacques Ellul.
Yes, Ellul is foundational here.
But it's also famously associated with the Unabomber Manifesto, so we need to be incredibly clear here.
Yes, absolutely clear. We must strictly separate the abhorrent, unjustifiable violence committed by Theodore Kaczynski from the underlying sociological and psychological critique of technology.
Right.
While his actions were universally condemned acts of domestic terrorism, the psychological framework he drew upon regarding technology's impact on human fulfillment remains a subject of intense, legitimate academic study in sociology and psychology. We are examining the psychological theory of human motivation here, completely divorced from any justification of violence.
Exactly. The violence is horrific and condemned entirely. But the psychological diagnosis of why modern industrialized humans feel so profoundly unfulfilled, that is what we need to unpack, because it explains our screen addiction perfectly.
It does.
So what exactly is the power process?
The theory posits that for a human being to feel psychologically healthy, stable, and fulfilled, they must regularly complete a cycle known as the power process. And this process has 4 necessary steps: goal, effort, attainment, and autonomy.
Goal, effort, attainment, autonomy. Walk us through how that looks in a natural evolutionary context.
Okay, think about human beings for the vast majority of our evolutionary history as hunter-gatherers. The goal is straightforward: physical survival.
Right. Finding food, building a shelter, protecting the tribe from predators.
Yes. The effort is the intense physical and mental work required to track an animal or forage for edible plants. The attainment is successfully acquiring that food or building that shelter.
You got the food.
You got the food. And the 4th step, autonomy, means that you had direct, independent agency in that process. You used your own skills and your own body to survive. When a human completes this entire cycle, the brain rewards them with a profound sense of fulfillment and psychological stability.
You set the goal, you put in the real effort, you attain the result, and you did it yourself. That makes perfect sense. But how does modern technology disrupt this?
Modern technology ruins the power process by breaking it on both ends of the spectrum. On one end, it makes the fundamental goals of survival too easy.
Too easy.
Yeah. The basic necessities of life require almost no autonomous effort for the vast majority of people in the industrialized world today. You don't have to hunt. You tap a button on a food delivery app, and a cooked meal arrives at your door 30 minutes later.
That's true.
You don't have to entertain yourself by telling stories or making music. Entertainment is entirely passive. You just sit on a couch and the algorithm spoon-feeds you content. The deep, necessary effort and autonomy have been completely stripped away from our daily survival.
So we are comfortable, but we are completely unfulfilled because we didn't actually do anything to earn that comfort.
Exactly.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, modern technology has made meaningful, grand goals too difficult.
Precisely. Because we are globally connected now, we are confronted daily with massive systemic issues. Eco-anxiety, global wealth inequality, massive geopolitical conflicts.
Huge problems.
These are goals that require action, but they completely destroy the autonomy aspect of the power process.
This is where the free rider principle comes in, right?
Yes. The free rider principle in this context is the demoralizing realization that your individual autonomous effort is statistically meaningless in the face of massive global system.
It's that feeling of, what's the point?
Right. You can rigorously recycle every single piece of plastic you ever touch. You can bike to work. You can eat vegan. But your mind knows that your individual effort is entirely negated by a single industrial factory or one multinational oil tanker.
It's a drop in the ocean.
You have a massive goal saving the planet, but zero autonomy or tangible attainment. You are essentially powerless.
So we are trapped. The easy things, like getting food, are too easy to provide any psychological fulfillment, and the meaningful things, like fixing society, are too complex and massive to allow for individual autonomy.
Exactly. The power process is completely thwarted.
But the fundamental evolutionary human drive to exert effort toward a goal doesn't just evaporate, does it?
No, it doesn't. That psychological energy has to go somewhere. And this is exactly where we see the rise of what are called surrogate activities.
Surrogate activities, meaning artificial goals.
Exactly. Because we lack authentic autonomous survival goals, we invent artificial goals that we pursue simply for the sake of having anything to work toward. We channel our thwarted evolutionary drives into these surrogates just to simulate the feeling of the power process.
This explains so much about modern culture, like chasing arbitrary high scores or prestige ranks in competitive video games.
Oh, absolutely.
Or endlessly accumulating tech gadgets or fashion items just to optimize a lifestyle aesthetic. And, connecting this right back to our previous point, engaging in performative political activism online.
Online arguments are the ultimate hollow surrogate activity. Arguing on X or Reddit gives you a clear goal. Defeat the ideological enemy. It requires effort, typing, finding links, crafting insults, and you get the attainment of likes and retweets from your tribe.
But it's completely hollow because it doesn't change reality. It serves the tech platforms by generating ad revenue through your engagement, but it doesn't actually manifest tangible change in the real world.
Not at all.
It's a simulation of meaningful action.
It creates the illusion of the power process without any of the actual substance. You feel like you fought a war, but you just stared at a screen and made a billionaire richer.
Okay, let me push back here, though. Because aren't surrogate activities kind of necessary for a peaceful, civilized society? I mean, if we didn't channel our aggressive evolutionary drive to conquer and struggle into, say, video games or professional sports or even online debates, wouldn't we just be constantly fighting each other in the streets?
That's a very fair point.
Isn't a society focused on surrogate activities inherently better than one focused on brutal, daily physical survival?
That is a vital distinction to make, and it prevents this whole critique from just being pure pessimism. Not all surrogate activities are inherently destructive or hollow.
Okay, good.
The psychological literature, particularly the work on the concept of flow by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, unpacks the difference between healthy surrogate activities and hollow digital consumption.
Okay, so what makes a surrogate activity healthy?
A healthy surrogate activity can induce a flow state. These are what Csikszentmihalyi calls autotelic activities, meaning the activity contains its meaning and purpose within itself.
Like doing something just for the sake of doing it.
Exactly. Think of a musician deeply engaged in mastering a difficult piece on the piano, or a rock climber meticulously scaling a wall, or someone woodworking in their garage. The climber isn't climbing just to stand on top of the rock. They're climbing for the profound, immersive engagement of the physical climb itself.
It's about the process.
Right. It builds real, tangible competence.
Yeah.
It creates genuine, reflective autonomy.
I see. So it's about the internal quality of the engagement and whether it builds a real skill or just harvests your attention.
Exactly. The problem arises with hollow, algorithm-driven consumption. Mindlessly scrolling TikTok for 3 hours or engaging in toxic, repetitive online arguments doesn't build any real competence.
You don't level up in real life.
No, you don't. It doesn't induce a state of creative flow. It simply manipulates your dopamine system, spikes your cortisol, and leaves you feeling utterly drained and empty. It is a surrogate activity designed by corporations to harvest your attention for profit, not to fulfill your deep psychological need for autonomous, meaningful effort.
Man. So let's take stock of where we are. We've diagnosed the illness. We see the trap of the Digital Panopticon where we willingly auto-exploit ourselves for the sake of the project of me.
Check.
We see how we are using the algorithmic mirror as a pacifier to avoid the dizziness of freedom, and how it's monetizing our monkey brain impulses through conviction addiction. And we see how we are desperately trying to find meaning in hollow surrogate activities.
The picture we've painted is quite bleak.
It is really bleak, but the brilliant thing about this deep dive and the source material we are pulling from is that we don't stop there.
We need a way out.
Exactly. We don't just diagnose the despair, we look for the cure. And to find that escape route, we turn to the existentialists for a strategy of rebellion. This is where we bring in the absurd hero's revolt.
And the existentialist framework is incredibly powerful here because it doesn't offer cheap, toxic positivity.
No laugh love here.
Definitely not. It doesn't tell you to just smile and log off. It demands radical honesty about the severity of our situation. The first step in this revolt is facing head-on what Jean-Paul Sartre called epistemic loneliness.
Epistemic loneliness. That is a heavy phrase. It's the realization that we are fundamentally, inescapably alone in our own consciousness, right?
Yeah.
Like, no one can ever truly 100% know what it is like to be inside your head, looking out through your eyes. And you can never truly know another person's subjective experience. We are basically trapped in our own minds.
Yes, it is a fundamental condition of human existence. And social media offers a very seductive but ultimately fake cure for this deep loneliness.
Because it simulates connection.
Right. It promises infinite connection.
Yeah.
But it often relies on what the philosopher Martin Buber called I-it relationships.
I-it versus I-a. Break that down for us.
So in an I-thou relationship, you engage with another person as a complete, complex, subjective universe. You respect their full humanity.
Our real connection.
But social media platforms train us to engage in I-it relationships. We treat other people online as instruments, as an it. We consume their perfectly curated photos for our own entertainment. We use their posts as a sounding board for our own validation.
Or we just use them as a target.
Exactly. In the case of outrage, we reduce them to a single evil caricature to attack, boosting our own moral status. We fail to recognize the profound, complex subjectivity of the other person.
We literally turn people into content. And in doing so, we hide in the algorithm to prevent ourselves from facing that dizziness of freedom we talked about earlier. We use the noise of the timeline to avoid the terrifying reality that the universe isn't going to hand us a purpose.
There is no ultimate script.
There's no script. We have to write our own meaning. But the algorithm whispers to us, don't worry, you don't have to think. Just look at the screen and I'll tell you what to care about today. I'll tell you who to be mad at.
It's very comforting in a dark way. But to truly rebel, to truly become free, we have to rip that digital pacifier out of our mouths and face the dread of our own freedom. We have to look at the blank page of our lives.
And this is where Albert Camus becomes our ultimate guide today. Camus offers a concept that feels tailor-made for the digital age, the absurd hero. And he famously illustrates this using the ancient Greek myth of Sisyphus.
Which is such a perfect metaphor for scrolling. For those who might not recall the myth, Sisyphus was a king condemned by the gods to a very specific, eternal punishment.
Pushing the rock.
Right. He had to roll a massive, heavy boulder up the side of a steep mountain. But every time he reached the very top, the boulder would slip from his grasp and roll all the way back down to the bottom. Sisyphus had to walk back down and start over for all eternity.
It is the ultimate picture of futile, meaningless labor. It is the literal definition of despair, working endlessly for absolutely zero attainment.
It is intended to be the ultimate punishment. But Camus, in one of the most brilliant pivots in modern philosophy, flips the script entirely. He looks at this eternal torment and writes, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy."
Which, on its face, sounds absolutely insane. Like, why on earth would Sisyphus be happy pushing a rock for eternity?
Because, Camus argues, Sisyphus is utterly lucid. He has no illusions about his reality. He isn't hoping that one day the gods will magically change their minds.
He's not waiting to be saved.
Exactly. He isn't hoping that this time, miraculously, the boulder will just stay at the top. He isn't relying on what we called earlier predictive salvation. He isn't hoping an algorithm or a politician or a new tech gadget will eventually serve his a perfect life.
He accepts the absurdity of his condition. The universe is meaningless, and the rock will always roll back down.
Yes. And in that absolute lucid acceptance, he reclaims his autonomy. He realizes that the gods can control the rock, but they cannot control his mind. He makes the rolling of the boulder his choice. He pours his passion, his defiance, and his entire consciousness into the physical act of pushing. His revolt is his lucidity and his absolute refusal to be crushed by despair. By owning his struggle, he defeats the punishment.
He owns the struggle. That is incredibly powerful. And this connects deeply to a broader philosophical concept called amor fati, which translates to loving one's fate.
Yes, Nietzsche talked about this as well.
Now, amor fati doesn't mean being passively resigned. It doesn't mean you're thrilled when you get sick or when you lose your job. It means accepting the present moment exactly as it is, in all its chaotic, painful reality, without constantly hoping for some external force to rescue you.
It is the ultimate rejection of the algorithmic promise. The algorithm says, keep scrolling, and the next video will make you happy. Amor fati says, I accept this present moment, and I choose how to act within it, regardless of what the screen promises.
So if we translate this high-level existential philosophy into actionable strategies for our daily digital lives, what does an existential revolt actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon?
It's a great question.
Because, as we discussed, true freedom isn't about dramatically smashing your smartphone with a hammer or moving to an off-grid cabin in the woods to escape technology forever.
No, running away isn't a revolt. It's just a different form of surrender. True freedom in the digital age is about cultivating what we can call reflective autonomy.
Reflective autonomy. Let's unpack how we actually build that.
It starts with de-automatizing your mind. It means breaking the subconscious twitch muscle habit of reaching for your phone the exact second you feel a pang of boredom, or a moment of social anxiety, or just a sliver of existential dread.
It's so hard to do, but so necessary.
It is. When you feel that phantom buzz or that urge to scroll, you pause. You become lucid like Sisyphus. You say, I see the boulder. I see the algorithmic trap. And then you make a conscious choice.
It's about creating internal feedback loops of competence that do not rely on digital metrics at all. You have to find fulfillment in the intrinsic value of an autotelic activity.
Like we talked about with flow states.
Right. You read a difficult book because engaging with the ideas stretches your mind, not so you can post an aesthetic picture of the cover on Instagram. You learn to play the guitar for the sheer joy of the vibration of the strings, not for TikTok views. You sit down and have a deep, nuanced, challenging conversation with a friend without checking your notifications every 5 minutes.
You detach your inherent self-worth from the metric. You stop bowing at the altar of the digital church entirely.
I was trying to think of how to visualize this feeling of breaking free. It's like realizing you've been living your entire life inside a massive windowless casino.
A casino is the perfect analogy.
You've been staring at the flashing lights, pulling the lever on the slot machine over and over again, just waiting for the algorithmic jackpot of validation. And an existential revolt doesn't mean you have to burn the casino to the ground.
No need for arson.
Right, you don't have to destroy the internet. But it means you finally realize you have legs. You can just choose to take your hands off the slot machine, turn around, and walk out the doors. You can step outside, feel the cold, real air on your face, and just appreciate the vastness of the night sky for exactly what it is, not for what it can give you.
That is a beautiful way to phrase it. You reclaim your most precious resource, your attention. You refuse to let the machine dictate your desires, your political outrage, or your emotional state.
You take the power back.
You step out of the panopticon. You stop being an exploited project, and you become the conscious author of your own life.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and recap this incredible journey we've been on today. We started by looking at Bentham's Panopticon and understanding how we've shifted from being subjects controlled by outside forces to becoming our own internal slave drivers, constantly auto-exploiting ourselves in the digital age.
The shift to psychopolitics.
We peered into the seductive trap of the algorithmic mirror, seeing how it bypasses our mature identity to feed our raw monkey brain. We unpack the mechanics of conviction addiction and how the effect heuristic destroys nuanced debate in favor of tribal outrage.
And we diagnose the surrogate activities.
Yes, recognizing them as cheap imitations of the power process. And finally, we found a path forward through the empowering, radically lucid rebellion of Camus's absurd hero.
It is an intellectually demanding philosophy, but it is ultimately a deeply liberating one. It gives the power entirely back to the individual.
So to you, listening right now, whether you are driving, doing the dishes, or just taking a walk, I want you to remember this. You are not just a project to be endlessly optimized for a digital economy.
You're not just data.
You are not just a data point, a body without organs to be harvested for engagement and ad revenue. You are a conscious, complex, profoundly capable human being, living in an often absurd world, but completely capable of creating your own deep meaning. You have the ultimate power to choose exactly where you direct your attention.
And as we close today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to take with you.
Let's hear it.
We spent a lot of time talking about how the algorithmic mirror only reflects the most anxious, impulsive, and reactive parts of ourselves. It reflects our unorganized desires. So think about this. What happens to your identity the very moment you finally decide to look away from that mirror?
Oh, wow.
Do you disappear because you are no longer being perceived and validated by the machine? Or is that the exact moment, in the silence and the dizzying freedom, that you finally begin to exist?
Oh, man. That is exactly the kind of question you need to take a long phone-free walk with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the algorithmic self. Do yourself a favor today. Put down the phone, reclaim your attention, embrace the absurdity, and go live fiercely in the present. We'll catch you next time.